again, they're tying into that nostalgia. I remember the first trailer I saw. This was in the trailer, and I remember everyone paused and be like, "Hold on, that's the movie playing behind them." Like everybody's like, "Wait, what is this movie?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, we're going super meta then. Like, is the Matrix a movie within the movie?"
Hello, friends. I'm Anderson Marchak,
And I'm Ricardo Segura.
and we are the Panel Bros. Welcome to the panel.
Welcome to the panel. Yeah.
Well, here we are.
Oh yeah.
We are currently going through a certain franchise right now, and
Mhm.
as of this recording, it's late 2024. It's November, and we are now coming to the final movie in the franchise for now.
Yeah.
And let's get into it here.
Oh yeah.
This movie was directed by Lana Wachowski.
Mhm.
It was released December the 22nd of 2021. Today, the Panel Bros are going to be doing a breakdown for The Matrix Resurrections.
This is an interesting movie to say the least. We have mentioned off the air that the Matrix sequels are no stranger to divisiveness, whether it's Reloaded, whether it's Revolutions, whether it's Resurrections. These movies are divisive for a reason. So I'm looking forward to discuss it because today might have been my third time watching it. We talked about that. I remember seeing it on opening day, seeing it again sometime later, and then seeing it today for the third time. And I feel like every time I've seen it, I've got a different takeaway from it. So, I'm looking forward for us to break this one down.
Yeah, me too. I don't remember how many times I've seen it. I've seen it either 2, 3 times at the most. And like Ricardo, obviously, we just waiting for this movie after so long, like it was announced that a new Matrix movie was coming out and we
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. So for it to actually see the light of day was pretty shocking. Um, and like Ricardo, I can see why this movie was divisive, and
Hmm.
we will absolutely um, get into that. I did want to say before we forget, this is one of those movies that was released on HBO Max at
Yeah.
the same time as the movie theater. So we just got out of the world situation, as we like to call it, in
Yeah.
2020. But going to the theater was kind of like a shaky thing for a lot of 2021. So HBO Max went and announced that they're going to release everything. uh,
Everything, bro.
every movie theater release will have a simultaneous release on Max, and it was a selling point for you to get Max, so you could
Yeah.
see those movies without having to worry about going to the movie theater and possibly having to deal with the world situation. So, and even though the theater, I don't want to say banned, but you could go out freely before the end of the year. Warner Brothers Discovery held true to their word and said, nope, we're not going to lift that from HBO Max. We're going to keep true to our word. You can continue seeing those movies on Max until the end of the year. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I was very fortunate that they released it on HBO Max because I watched this in the hospital. Uh, when my second child was born. She was born on the 21st, and this was released on the 22nd. So we were still in the hospital, and she was down for a good sleep. And I was like, you know what? I could watch The Matrix Resurrections. And I was in the hospital, just in the couch, just watching on my HBO Max, being like, oh, baby girl sleeping. Okay, let me watch it. So I was very fortunate and lucky because if it was only theatrical, I probably wouldn't have been able to catch it at that point. It probably just wasn't going to happen.
Alrighty, so here we are with our plot summary. Uh, we have our opening scene.
Hmm.
You see a woman instructed to raise her hands from behind,
Hmm.
and the scene looks awfully familiar. Um, and you start to see that she's mimicking Trinity from the original Matrix movie. We get to see the cops and the agents again outside. They even drop the line, "Your men are already dead."
Hmm.
So that's our opening scene, and we see some action. It's just the bullets, all this, that, the other, and immediately it's like, what's happening here, right?
I was, I'm not going to lie, it's very early on in the movie, but I got nervous because I was like, are we going to end up, is this going to feel too much like just a reboot in terms of a lot of things are going to be very similar? Because we're opening with one of the most iconic openings with the Trinity opening, with different characters and actors in those roles. So when we open it and we even get the agent saying like, no, your men are already dead, and you have our, quote unquote new Agent Smith and the sunglasses, and I was like, oh, what do we, oh, I'm worried, what do we, but relatively quick we get an explanation for what's happening, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right, let's see where we're going. Like, they mentioned the idea that they're running an old program in order to, evolve some of the other programs. Like, they're running these old codes and these old these old stories, if you will, and evolving new programs. And I'm like, okay, so they're telling these stories in a way and coding them in order to evolve their programs and whatnot, but it's slightly off and different. But again, still very, very familiar to what we've seen. But at this point, I was kind of like, okay, what's going on here?
Alrighty, so we have Bugs. You
I
mentioned
love
her.
okay.
Yeah.
I love Bugs. I love her. She's a great standout for me in the movie. I was like, dude, I want to see her again. I love Bugs.
Yeah, we have Jessica Henwick here, and since
Mhm.
I mean, I got to show her some love because she's been in a few projects. We usually save this for the cast portion, but we're just going to put it
Mhm.
out there for those of you wondering why she looks so familiar. Now, most of you will know her from the Marvel Netflix universe
Mhm.
and Defenders, Iron Fist, and so on as Colleen. So that's where most of you um, will know her from. But she went on to do a couple different things. Luke Cage, obviously, she was in that. She was in Underwater. Remember that
Mhm.
horror movie? She was also in The Gray Man. She
Yeah.
was in Glass Onion.
Mhm.
So she's been in a few things. So that's why you feel like you might have seen her before, but more on Jessica Henwick later.
Yeah.
Alrighty. We have a young woman named Bugs that learns that the Matrix is running old code in a loop, enacting the moment when Trinity first found Neo within the Matrix. That was our opening scene. So Bugs discovers a program embodying Morpheus and helps free him from from the simulation. So right off the bat, Bugs is recapping the story for us.
Mhm.
Um, the Morpheus reveal was pretty wild, and we see this young man there, clearly not Lawrence Fishburne, saying, "I am Morpheus, and I have to find Neo." And you have a nice tender moment. She hugs him. Uh,
Yeah, it's this again, I as someone who was a little saddened that Lawrence Fisher wasn't returning as Morpheus, and then we had this moment where he's like, "I'm Morpheus." I was like, "You're not Morpheus. How dare you staying where he stood?" You know what I mean? Like, just joking around. But I love Yaya. I think Yaya is a
oh
great
yeah,
actor. So when again we're kind of getting this exposition, but we're not getting a full explanation just yet. So when I thought it was odd because again he's in full Agent Smith mode, and then all of a sudden he's very much just like, "No, I know something's off. I felt something has been off for some time. I've seen the code. I'm not entirely too sure." And they kind of have this breakthrough moment. And he says, he goes, "I'm Morpheus." And she's like, "Oh my God." And she hugs him. And again, he's a program. So we don't have the full explanation just yet. But I'm like, okay, so now Morpheus is a program. Okay, let's see where this goes.
yeah, and they drop the line. Choice is an illusion. You already know what you
Mhm.
have to do. So I want to say she gives him the pill.
Yeah, like yeah. She does the whole thing with the pill, and it's like, okay.
Yeah. So we have Thomas Anderson, uh, Keanu Reeves, of course,
Mhm.
for the sport and the long hair, the look that
Yeah,
he sports usually when he's not doing movies.
it was interesting because I was like, oh, they're not gonna get him to cut his hair. I was like, nah, he's sporting the long hair, and he does eventually cut it. But it's cool. We get to see the John Wick look vibe that Keanu Reeves has been rocking for a while.
Yeah. So he's the creator of a video game series called The Matrix,
Hmm.
based on his faint memories as Neo, of course. At a coffee shop, he regularly encounters Tiffany, a married mother with no recollection of her past, on whom Anderson based the game character Trinity. So he's there with one of the people on his team, and he catches Neo looking at Trinity, Tiffany, and
Hmm.
you got to say hi to her. And then he goes and, have you met my friend Thomas?
Yep.
So he does that whole thing. And there's this moment where they shake hands and she just looks at him. Have I met you before?
Yeah.
So really interesting moment there because clearly she doesn't know who she is.
Yeah, and again, as someone who is a big fan of Trinity, and I was heartbroken when we lost her in Revolution, seeing her back, I was so excited. Again, I don't know where the story's going at this point, um, but the idea that they're within this close of a proximity, and yet they don't know who they are yet, and when you get that handshake and you feel that connection a little bit, I was like, okay, it's there. We just got to try to wake it up. And it is interesting that they went the whole, the Matrix is a video game and you get this. I thought it was cool. We start getting to that meta territory. You start seeing all the action figures and the toy statues and the hot toys, and it's all the Matrix memorabilia and whatnot. And you're like, oh, that's so cool. And they made it into a video game. I thought prior to watching this movie that they were going to be movies within the movie. I was like, oh, they're going to be movies. Like, no, they're video games. And there's something about the idea of them choosing to make it a video game, because you and I have talked about this about video games in general, where video games, you know, you take part in video games. Like you
Right.
watch a film, but when you play video games, you are essentially living that out. So I think it does make sense in the idea of like, hey, he takes those faint memories that he has and puts them into a video game, and it's that choice you make to play it, whether you play it or not. So that was cool. That was cool.
So Thomas Anderson has created a simulation called a modal to develop game characters. He struggles to separate perceived reality from dreams, a known concern among his coworkers and his partner, whom I've shared a screenshot with here. So during the meeting with the partner, you see the flashbacks to the Matrix. The partner mimics Hugo Weaving's lines as
Hmm.
Agent Smith, kind of giving us a hint of who this character is going to eventually end up becoming. He tells him about how Warner Brothers will move on with a sequel to the video game trilogy with or without them,
Yeah.
mirroring the real life trilogy,
Hmm.
and that this may or may not have happened without Lana Wachowski, which we will talk about later.
Yeah, when they put that line in there, I was like, "Oh, I wonder if that was intentional, like to kind of put out like, hey, like this was a real possibility. The idea of Matrix sequels without us in general." So they were like, "Oh, we got to do it." Look, it's Warner Brothers, I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, so that was a nice little thing that we will be discussing later.
And then he drops this line that we do see in the trailer. We're going to take it back to where it all started, back to the Matrix. And
Hmm.
shout out to Jonathan Groff, man. He does such a good job as this character in this
He
movie.
does.
Great.
He does.
I mean, great actor, period.
Yeah,
But
and I think if more people don't know him, you should find him. He's great, and he's awesome. I love his little cadence when he starts to switch into his Hugo Weaving dialogue and whatnot, where it's very small, but you catch a little bit, and he's great. He's great in general.
yeah, for those of you don't know, this is the voice of Kristoff in the
Oh
Frozen
yeah,
series.
yes,
You might know him from King in Hamilton as King George.
loved him in Hamilton, bro. He's so
Um,
good in
he
Hamilton.
was in Charlemagne's Knock at the Cabin.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah, and so on. So yeah, shout out to Jonathan Groff. So Thomas's psychoanalyst prescribes him blue pills that he
Hmm.
takes each day to suppress the occurrences. This is when he keeps getting flashbacks of the
Yeah.
Matrix. But he stops taking them. So we get this montage, and it sort of reminded me. Remember that montage of Squidward and SpongeBob, where he's doing the same thing every day.
Yeah, yeah,
Starts
yeah, yeah.
happy, and eventually he's just getting more and more
Yes.
miserable, living the
The
same mundane life.
the monotonous nature,
Yeah.
and I think and it works on a variety of levels, right? It works, and that's one thing I've always given the Matrix is their ability to tap into things that we can, relate to. So the idea of the Matrix being, this freedom of this world that you're locked into, you feel like a slave to it, and then to show the sequence literally feeling like a slave to the monotony and the nature of it all, and just him, like you said, doing the same exact thing every single day, just going through the process, not feeling anything. And it's like, oh man, I could see how someone would be like, there's got to be more than this. There has to be. And I can see why someone, especially Neo, who has these memories that are just sitting there in the back of his mind that pop up every once in a while, that makes him question whether there's something more to this reality. And then you have his therapist who's kind of like trying to keep him in check with these blue pills that he has to take.
So you see this montage with his life spliced with taking the blue pill every day. White Rabbit is playing, great
Mm-hmm.
song, and he's going through the memories. Excuse me, he's just going through the motions rather, and but also I did say memories. He's going through the memories of the Matrix,
Yeah.
and you see this one moment where he touches the mirror, almost expecting the thing to happen, and he's like
Mm-hmm.
laughing to himself. Um, the blue pills were a big part of this montage too, because he's
Yeah.
taking them every day. And folks, if you don't remember, the blue pill was you stay locked up in the Matrix. The red one was to
Mm-hmm.
break out. So, but eventually he's like, "Now we're done," and he dumps it down the
Yeah.
drain. All right. So he's at the coffee shop again, and he sees Tiffany, and they sit down and they have a discussion here. And she's just like pouring it on here. I feel like I know you. But she put it out there. She's like, even though we'd never met, I did have to at least Google you.
Yeah.
So she Googled him to find out who he was. And she was like, I promise I didn't know you before that. And so she saw everything. And then she asked him a question. She said, was the main character based on you?
Yeah.
And he obviously, he lets her know, yeah, some of him, and then she pauses and she looks at him and she said, Trinity really reminds me a lot of myself, down to the
Yeah.
motorcycles, because I love motorcycles. So we see
Yeah.
there's faint hint that maybe Trinity might break through eventually, but they're not ready to give it to us just yet.
Yeah, she's feeling it. And I love when it's such a simple line, but she goes, I like her, referring to Trinity. And she
Yeah.
goes, I like her. And I'm like, oh, there's that connection. Like, I love these really somber moments that we have in the Matrix films because obviously, when you think about the Matrix, you think about the over the top action, the special effects, et cetera, et cetera. And it's one of the reasons why I was so keen to the Oracle scenes because it's just two people having a conversation. So the fact that we're having Thomas and quote unquote Tiffany have this conversation where they're kind of opening up a little bit about themselves, and you start to notice that Tiffany does have an inkling of feeling towards the character of Trinity in the Matrix games, if you will. And there's a very small moment that I appreciated too. It's very quick, where you see her reflection on the table, and it's a completely different person. Like it's not the Trinity that we know. And I like that they make it a point to show it's like, hey, like they wouldn't even recognize one another because they don't look like Neo. They don't look like Trinity. Their appearance is vastly different. And I like that for a brief moment, they reminded us, because again, we're getting lost in this conversation and they take a moment to show you like, hey, but remember, this is not Trinity. This is Tiffany. This is what she looks like. She's a completely different person.
We see a scene now where Morpheus meets Neo in the bathroom. And Morpheus appears by walking out of the stall.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts talking to him. And, you know, well, Thomas at the time, he's like, I know you. And then he starts telling me, he's like, and he starts thinking that he's losing his mind. He's like, no, 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 no. And he puts his arm out to let him know, hey, this isn't
Yeah. Yeah.
this isn't
Yep.
a hallucination. Touch me.
Mm-hmm.
And once he pulls the red pill out, Anderson's
It's
like, nope. He's
it's
like, oh no, 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 no.
no,
And he
no,
waves
no.
his finger.
Yeah.
SWAT comes in, the bullets start flying everywhere. We get explosions. Yaya's going full on action.
Bro,
He's running up the wall, like he's pursing his lips, like he's like
I
posing.
love
Oh, it's
Yaya in this,
great.
bro. One of my favorite things about Yaya and about his performance is that he is essentially the idea of Morpheus, right? The code of Morpheus. But as an actor, Yaya and possibly Lana as a director were like, listen, we can't have you just be what Lawrence Fishburne is, Morpheus. We can't have that. So Yaya does this thing that's so awesome where he walks out of the stall and he does like the Morpheus tone. You know, he comes out, he's Morpheus, and then he kind of just rolls off his shoulders like, I tried to do that thing, familiar to you. And he goes, oh yeah, but there's a very loose nature to this version of Morpheus, even down to the color scheme. Again, when we saw Morpheus, you had the dark leather, the glasses. He's wearing this orange, like full orange getup. That's
Yeah.
awesome, dude. It's an awesome getup. Like the style is on point, and it's almost like it's almost like he's peacocking a little bit because he's just like, hey, look at me, you know what I mean? And as you mentioned, when Neo freaks out, it's hilarious because it's like, wait a minute, all these quote unquote illusions that I've been happening that my therapist has been telling me time and time again, like, no, this is not real. All of a sudden is being presented as real to me. And now I'm being presented with a red pill. And he's like, no, waves his finger and just runs out. And like you said, we have the SWAT team come in. Yaya's doing the thing, a gun in each hand, going crazy, holding it down. This sequence is fun.
We want to give a shout out to Yahya Abdul Mateen II.
Yeah.
He's been getting a lot of work in recent years. So
Yes.
he was Black Manta in the Aquaman movies.
Mm-hmm.
He was in Jordan Peele's Us. He was in the Watchmen TV show.
Oh yeah.
Trial of the Chicago 7. Great watch. I enjoyed that movie.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
he was in Candyman, the Candyman reboot.
Loved him in Candyman.
Years ago. He was in Ambulance. I want to say that's
Bro,
Michael
that's
Bay.
another dude. Michael Bayham, bro. Look, that's a good
Yeah.
movie. Like Michael Bayham is good. This was Yaya was blowing up, man, and I was so
Yeah.
happy for Yaya, dude. Like, I think once I saw him in as Black Manta, and other projects, obviously, I feel like that was the moment. I was like, all right, this guy's gonna blow up, and he did. He was everywhere for a good minute.
Yeah, great job casting him in this role, and we're going to
Mhm.
talk more about Lawrence Fishburne and such, but they picked somebody great, to fill this role
Yeah.
here. Alrighty, and I did want to touch on it. We think that Neo's going to take the red pill before he starts waving his finger no, and you just see him. He's like, this can't be happening. So he's
Yeah.
just in denial of everything as it's happening there. Alrighty, here we are. So Anderson's business partner regains his memories as Agent Smith, Neo's former nemesis. So this is continuing on with the action sequence because it happens very fast.
Yeah.
Morpheus is just guns blazing, and Thomas gets out of the bathroom. He's running back there, and it's just SWAT team. It's like a swarm of people. Just
Mhm.
throwback. Just a classic Matrix, and the business partner jumps in there, and then all of a sudden, like, it just hits him, and
Yeah.
he just screams Mr. Anderson really loud too. It's so
Yeah.
intense, the choice that he used there. And I would have loved if he used the Hugo Weaving tone again, but he already used it
Mhm.
once, so he couldn't use it again.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a cool moment because it feels like obviously you have this new coded Morpheus and you still have Agent Smith locked away in here. And there's always this connection between Agent Smith and Neo. So the fact that Neo is alive, there's still a version of the Agent Smiths alive, especially due from copying onto one another. And it seems that the more that Neo becomes aware of exactly what's happening with the Matrix, the people around him are also affected. We have Morpheus come to light out of Yaya's character, and then you have Agent Smith now. It's kind of just like, oh, wait a minute, what's happening? Like the more awake Neo's getting, it's also waking up the others, and he's like, oh, and like you said, he does the whole Mr. Anderson, like this very just hard, aggressive yell, and he feels comfortable. He's holding up that Desert Eagle pistol, and it just feels comfortable in his hand, and he just goes full Agent Smith mode at that point.
He drops another line, "I've missed you," just kind of like when
Yes.
Weaving said that.
Mr. Anderson, I've missed you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We see the black cat. This is nostalgia and callbacks, just typical of a, let's say it, a legacy sequel.
Yep.
It's been a number of years since the last sequel came out, so that's what qualifies as a legacy sequel. I want to say 10 years or more are the unofficial rule, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken.
Okay.
Um, Either way, and if we didn't know it by now, it's definitely nostalgia to the point that Wachowski just cuts the old trilogy whenever they can.
Mhm.
Excuse me, whenever she can, rather. Excuse me. So you're seeing, just throwbacks to either The Matrix, Reloaded, or Revolutions whenever
Oh,
you
yeah.
can. And in this
Yeah.
in particular, that wasn't Rain. I want to say that was the
Yeah, it was a sprinkler system.
yeah,
Yep, the
but
sprinkler
just
system.
we're mirroring Matrix
Mhm.
Revolutions, that final
Yep.
showdown. So just little hints there.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. They made it a point to show you like just full on like memories and sequences from the old movies as well as homages to those movies, as you mentioned, through like the sprinkler system in the rain.
Yeah, and the black cat just shows up multiple
Yeah,
times
yeah.
throughout the movie.
They even named the cat Deja Vu. Like
Yeah, there
they
you go.
I said this to you off the air. I'm like, there's not a lot of subtlety in this movie. Like it's very like, hey, we know what this is. It's nostalgia. Remember that black cat from the Matrix?
Yeah.
Remember we're gonna bring it back, and not only we're gonna bring it back, we're gonna name the cat Deja Vu just in case you forgot what it was for. So yeah.
So we shift to Thomas in a therapy session with his therapist, Neil Patrick Harris.
Mhm.
And this is where the movie starts sowing seeds of doubt that perhaps the Matrix has all been in Neo's mind. So I started getting scared. um, we know that everything happened the way that it
Yeah.
happened. But as far as this movie in particular goes, with the therapy session and the therapist consistently telling him it was just in your mind, it's
Mhm.
not real. I prescribed these blue pills to you to keep you from having those memories. You came off the medication and now you're continually having these memories of things that didn't happen. These memories inspired you to make the video game, but that doesn't mean that this actually happened to you.
Yeah.
So and I knew this wasn't going to happen, but for a split second, I was like, are we going to find out that Matrix was just either A, a dream, or B, a hallucination in this
Mhm.
man's mind? Like, we know that's not what's going to happen, but there's like a hint of doubt, a
Oh yeah.
small hint
Yeah.
of doubt. Is this like a reboot, like a meta reboot
Yeah.
where Thomas Anderson is having memories of this actual trilogy? I don't know what they were gonna do,
Yeah,
but
and because of the meta nature of the film so far, like it's definitely on the table. It's like they're playing with things so much that it's like if they wanted to, like if Lana and the studio decided, like, what if it wasn't real? And but it's becoming real, or whatever the case may be. Like everything that happened wasn't real, but the Matrix is, and he's now being open to it. Like they could have went any route. So yeah, I understand you completely when you're like, you know what? There's a small part back here where they might try to mess with us a little bit, especially considering it's a reboot, right? Like with these type of movies, they often tell you like, hey, forget what you know because everything's about to change, that type of thing. We could have ended up in a situation like that. Luckily, that's not the case, but yeah, it could have
I
happened.
um I thought about Wes Craven's New Nightmare,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
the lead was the actress Heather
hmm,
Langenkamp playing herself,
yeah,
but then Freddy is attacking her as if he's attacking her character from the Nightmare
yeah,
on Elm Street movie. So I thought they were trying to do something like that, where I guess Thomas Anderson is a version of Keanu Reeves,
yeah,
and like I
yeah.
thought that's
Like,
where we were going for a split second.
like,
I thought.
like they absolutely could have been like, oh well, these memories that Thomas has where he created the Matrix game is actually based on him almost waking up and he put it into this game and it's actually happening. Like
Right.
they could have definitely gone the New Nightmare route if they wanted
Something
to.
like that. Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. By the way, New Nightmare, underrated,
Awesome movie.
underrated. So a
Hmm.
lot of people get on it because it's meta. Nah, it was just ahead
I
of its
love it.
time.
I love it.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of nostalgia,
Yeah, here it comes.
yeah. So
Yeah.
they set the scene here where Neo walks into a movie theater playing The Matrix on the back wall.
Yes.
He meets Bugs and Morpheus again, and they're even set it up where the chairs are sitting there, kind of like where he first, took the red pill, with scenes in The Matrix playing on the back wall. And Morpheus tells them, nothing comforts anxiety like a little nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
No one can be told what the Matrix is, blah, blah, blah. You got to see it to believe it. Time to fly. And he shows Neo the red pill again.
Yep.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So,
This again, they're tying into that nostalgia. I remember the first trailer I saw. This was in the trailer, and I remember everyone paused and be like, "Hold on, that's the movie playing behind them." Like everybody's like, "Wait, what is this movie?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, we're going super meta then. Like, is the Matrix a movie within the movie?" You know. And at this point, again, I love Yaya's portrayal. I love the idea of him doing like he does the Morpheus and he's like blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Like we got to go through the motions. Like nothing worse like nostalgia. They got the chair set up. They bring out the red pill, and as you mentioned, he does the whole like time to fly. Like time to fly. Let's get this going. Like we're on a time crunch. Let's get this going.
so then we start getting a little bit more explanation here, thankfully.
Yeah.
Thomas says, he says 20 years. Why did it take so long? And then he finds out it's actually been 60 years since Neo and Trinity flew to Machine City. There's so much they don't know. Morpheus offers the blue and the red pill again. Neo drops an F-bomb as if he knows what's coming next.
Mm-hmm.
And the mirror T1000, I like to call it, sequence.
Yeah, the liquid metal, baby.
It starts going up his arm again. And but through the mirror, we can see the therapist pleading with Neo to tell him it isn't real. Clearly, this is where we find out that the therapist is probably a program trying to keep Neo locked inside the Matrix. And they eventually go through a door, escaping the agents that start to swarm the place. They end up on the train, and all the people start getting taken over. They shake, and instead of morphing into agents, we just see like some coating on their eyes. And they start attacking our team here. I put down that it felt like a zombie movie.
Yeah, look, everyone knows, and I've said it multiple times when we did our horror sections. I love the zombie genre. So introducing the idea of bots is what they call them in the movie. Is obviously they're like, hey, instead of just having agents pop up everywhere, it's like, why can't we just control these people? And like they all essentially become bots. Their eyes go black, you see the code, and it just go crazy. And as you mentioned, it feels like a zombie movie at this point, because everyone's just getting attacked from everybody. And a moment goes by, someone else turns, and then someone else turns, and it's just a big brawl on the train.
Right. And being that we're on a train, I gotta give Train to Busan a shout out. Zombies on a train. Yeah, I think so.
Yes, that's the movie, y'all. Watch it.
So they eventually get Neo to go through the mirror, and he bursts through the pod in the very next scene. Neo awakens in a pod, and he notices Trinity confined in another one nearby. So he wakes up, and it's confirmed. Yeah, he was in the Matrix, and now he's breaking out here. He gets extracted to Bugs's hovercraft. Oh, I don't know how to pronounce this. The Nemosine. So I just put down here just blatantly, this sucks. It sucks for Neo. Like,
yeah, dude.
He did everything, all of that, just to end up back in a pod again. You see Trinity in the pod too, so you still have questions of why this happened. Like, it's a lot to take in again. What happened that him and Trinity both ended up back in these pods?
Yeah, and we still don't know yet. Like we still don't have the information. Again, they talk about there's a 60-year gap that they have been able to find him. They found him. This is a big deal. And to see Trinity again, like you're kind of taken back after everything that happened in Revolutions. You're kind of like, wait, what's going on? Why are they alive? Why are they back in the pods? Why are the machines keeping them alive? And there's a really small moment that I enjoyed, is when Neo is over top of her pod. He says it. He says Trinity, and you see her hand
Yeah.
start to rise a little bit, and then as he gets further away it drops.
Yeah.
And it points out that connection, like it's like, oh wait a minute, like is she gonna wake up right here? And it's like, no, he has to take off, and she just goes right back into submissive sleep.
So after they bring him on the ship, they jack him back into the Matrix to stabilize him because clearly his body's reacting to this
Yeah.
um, this breakout. We get another fight between Morpheus and Neo in an effort to make him fight for his life, echoing what happened in the Matrix original Matrix movie. He eventually causes an explosion with his bare hands in the Matrix to the point that it shorts out the machinery he's plugged
Dude.
into. You learn eventually about the machines that have joined the human side,
Yeah.
because he sees because the machines helped extract him from the pod. They looked like the other machines.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they were able to get it to Bugs' ship here. Um, they are called Synthients now, and Neo's contact with the Synthian city, Machine City, had a huge impact, not only on humankind, but on the machines as well, to the fact that some of them want to join the cause.
Yeah.
It changed everything, and they drop a line: not all um, want to be controlled, and not all want to control others.
Yeah.
So that was
It was it was something cool because, and we talked about this, the Matrix films um have always tried to introduce a new element, something new, and I appreciate that. So the idea that we had machines that were working alongside humans was an interesting development. I was like, wait a minute, like all we've known are the machines being just humans are slaves, they are batteries, they are energy source. And you have this idea of like, no, there's Synthians now that are working alongside the humans. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting development. So I'm like, also, what happened between the machines? And again, we will find it out as time goes on. But at the moment, I was like, oh, what happened among the machines that this is a thing, that this is even possible? So I do like that new element that was introduced here.
Neo is brought to the human city Io, where he reunites with an elderly Niobe, Jada Pinkett Smith.
Yep.
She explains, so now we get the full story here. She explains that 60 years have passed in the real world since the machine war ended, and that Neo's allies, including the original Morpheus, have died over time.
Mm-hmm.
The peace achieved by Neo's sacrifice lasted many years, so it wasn't in vain.
Yeah.
There was peace between the machines and the humans. But the large number of humans leaving the Matrix created a serious power shortage.
Yep.
So, because the war stopped, more and more people kept breaking out of the Matrix. But guess what? They needed the people as the energy source. Um, this caused the machines to fight over limited resources. Soon afterward, Zion was targeted in an attempt to get humans to use as the power supply once more. However, this attempt caused many machines who still remembered Neo's sacrifice and the promise of peace to turn on the others in order to protect the humans. That allowed most of Zion's citizens to escape. So, if not for those machines, the people wouldn't have been able to escape.
Yeah.
Io was then founded by both machines and humans. So, this is a hybrid city now, it's not
Yeah.
Zion. So, the machines and humans have been working together ever since they've been working together against the remaining machines who want to return things they were before the war. Niobe refuses to risk Eo's safety to help Neo free Trinity and confines him to his quarters. So we get the full story now.
Mm-hmm.
And not only do we have physical machines here, we have, I guess, I want to call it like nanites, where they
Yeah, it reminded me of nanotech a lot. Yeah.
physical embodiments of the entity or program inside the
Mm-hmm.
matrix. So we have that. We actually have physical machines. So it's just really interesting. They're growing strawberries and
Yeah.
like throw back to the tasty wheat, the mush.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
like it's so different now. Again, I appreciated new elements. The idea that there was a civil war among the machines for power source, like that was something I never considered. And obviously at the end of Revolutions, they say like, oh, what's going to happen, to everyone, all the people. And he's like, we'll let them go. And there's obviously going to be some people that are going to choose not to wake up. But the number of people that were waking up was so great that it just affected the machines in such a negative manner that we had a civil war. And it was like, oh my God, the machines are fighting for energy sources amongst one another. And I do really appreciate that. Again, like, we have some machines work with the humans, and I like this hybrid community. Again, I think it's really cool. I like seeing when you see Morpheus as the nanotech, and he comes out, and you have all these nanobites come together, and it creates a silhouette of Morpheus, and he's just talking, and it allows him as a program to enter the physical real world. I'm like, oh, that's a really cool dynamic, and we get to see more of that. And they're working, with Niobe and everyone else, and something that's something that we would say is, pretty small, like a strawberry, is such a huge deal, you know what I mean, for them. And they talk about it, and it's like, they bring up the question, it's like, oh, what does a strawberry taste like? What is it supposed to taste like? We only know what we've been programmed in the Matrix and whatnot, but here is a strawberry, like, we've grown it, and this is what, and it's amazing. And I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. This is really, really good. And it's cool to see Niobe again. It is, she's got the Jada Pinkett Smith has the prosthetics on, so I do love that we get to see her alive and well, even though we lost so many others.
So Niobe does give us the full story about how we got here, and I did a rhetorical question here. Did you buy it when you first saw it? And it was like, wow, it was like a lot to take in,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Also, she kind of annoyed me the first time I saw this. So
Me too.
she really annoyed me.
Me
I mean, the
too.
savior is in front of you, and you're gonna lock
Yes.
him up. But now I get it, because it's not because of what Neo can do. It's not that she didn't trust Neo. It's that
Mhm.
Neo would bring the war back to EO,
Yeah.
and that's why. It was She didn't have
Yeah.
anything against Neo. He was the
No.
savior, you
Mhm.
know. She did mention she still didn't believe in the one,
Yep.
and call back to when she didn't believe in the one, but she believed in him to bring peace,
Yes. And
So
he brought that up, and he made sure he told her, because I remember a time ago you gave me your ship when
yeah,
no one else would, and there's a big difference between that Niobe and this Niobe. That
absolutely.
Niobe, again, if you're thinking about Niobe from the earlier sequels, like, she was ready to go, like, she was ready to stand her ground. Again, she didn't believe in the one, but she believed in Neo. He said, he can have my ship, no one tell me what I can do with my ship. She was all about it. And in this movie, 60 years has passed. Like, it's been 60 years, and she had to witness the fall of Zion, and the last thing that she wants is another war. Again, the first time I saw it, I was kind of annoyed, just like you, because I was kind of like, hold on, this is Neo. Like, Neo's here.
Right.
He's alive and well. That alone is pretty significant. Like, the last time you saw him was 60 years ago. He hasn't, like, in comparison, like, the age difference is extremely noticeable. So something's going on. He's back, but she's just not willing to risk the lives of everyone who's left after seeing what happened to Zion, and especially to Morpheus. Over time he passed, and everyone else did as well.
So Bugs and her crewmates free Neo from being captured here and enter the Matrix to contact Trinity. And you get to find out that Naomi knew that was going to happen. They actually set
Oh
it up
yeah.
on purpose so that they would
Mhm.
take him back. They are attacked by Smith and other exiled programs, including the Merovingian. But Neo and the Nemosine crew defeat them as Neo's abilities finally return to a certain extent. So let's break this down here. I put down that Jonathan Groff brings what he can to Smith. A little bit of what Hugo Weaving did, but with a lot more flair that Groff,
Yeah.
that only Groff can do. It's definitely his own version. We
Yeah.
see that the exile programs are back, and we see the Merovingian there as their quote unquote leader still. For those of you that don't remember, the exile programs, they're the ones that can do the extraordinary things within the
Yeah.
Matrix. But since the original program for the Matrix ended, they didn't have a place in the new version of the Matrix. There's a lot of forgiving here as far as the look goes. It's Mad Max meets the Lost Boys. That's what I put
Yeah.
down. And then the Merovingian is there. Like, there's no more special abilities. Well, there's certain special abilities, but I don't know how to explain it. Like, he looks a mess,
He looks like a homeless person.
Yeah, he looks like a mess. He's still speaking in French, but he's just ranting like a madman. It's very
Yeah.
odd.
It's a very, compared to what we saw with him in Reloaded and Revolutions, he's vastly different. And you could argue that's because of him losing everything. And he yells it and he talks about it. He goes, "We had this, I had power, I had this, and I've got nothing, and this and that." But it's jarring because you're like, right away, you're like, who is that? And you're like, oh my God, no way. And he just looks like this really, really homeless individual, just ranting and raving like a madman.
Yeah, and it was almost like they brought him back as like a comedic relief, I want to say. It felt like that to me. I don't know about you. I don't know if it
Because
was it unintentionally funny, because I don't know.
I don't know either, because like he shows up and I don't know if he has a bearing on anything other than they needed a fight sequence in this part, because he kind of comes into the movie, does his rant. He rants about a spin-off and movies and game. He's like, "Oh, we had this and you turned it into something as stupid as a video game and blah blah blah." And he goes, "I'm gonna get a spin-off." And I'm like, what is happening right now? Like,
Right.
what is this rant?
Uh,
And then he's in and out, and you're kind of just like, okay, you
well,
know what I mean? Like, okay,
well, Smith drops a joke, so I want to say it was meant to be a comedic part.
okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And look, there's definitely comedic bits in this movie. Again, Yaya's got
Right.
some great
Oh, of
comedic bits
course.
in this movie.
Yeah.
There's a big comedic bit at the very end of the movie, so it does feel like they wanted to incorporate more humor into this movie. So quite possibly, yeah, it could have been literally for the shock value of it. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it's this guy. You
Right.
know what I mean? And he's ranting and raving. It might have absolutely been
I
that.
and you wonder if well, clearly just I guess we could say it, Persephone finally left him.
Yeah, she's not there. You know what I mean? Like,
She's
maybe
not
that's
there.
the joke. Maybe the joke is like she's gone and he is completely disheveled and broken
Yeah.
and whatnot.
So
But I don't know.
how cool would that have been if they got Monica Bellucci back, but
Oh,
not
dude,
side by side with him, but doing her own thing? How cool would that have been?
I would have loved to seen her again.
Yeah.
Just any reason, I would have loved to have seen her again.
So the group leaves. Anything else about the Merovingian before we move on? Because you and I have talked about the Merovingian several times off
Yeah,
the air.
it. I don't know what else to
It's
add. It's just
jarring.
it's jarring. It's
It's
very
jarring.
jarring when he shows up because
Yeah.
again, like when he shows up, it's almost like, oh, that was a pretty significant character, right? Like that was a pretty significant character. So I'm like, okay, if he's here, there has to be a reason for it. And then when the scene ends, it's kind of like, I don't know what that reason was. I'm like, oh, okay, he's literally all right. That might have been the member berries. You know what I mean? The nostalgia. Like, oh, we'll get
Right.
him back in here. We'll show him. And again, I can understand the story element of him saying, hey, like you ruined everything. Like I used to be this like top 1% upper class program, and now I'm at the bottom because of you, Neo.
There you
So I'm
go.
like, all right, as a story element, I can get that. But again, it's brought in very quickly and it exits very quickly. So you're kind of just like, well, we haven't gained any traction off of it, but it feels like, yeah, just they needed a big fight sequence. So they're like, all right, we need other characters. So we got the exiles and we'll get him back and we'll do this, but it's over before you know it. And then that's the end of him. He's gone.
All right. Moving on. So the group leaves and locates Trinity, but before Neo can talk to her, his therapist appears and immobilizes him by manipulating time. He freezes
Mhm.
time. So we get to start seeing how much control this program has. He reveals that he is the Analyst, a program designed to study the human psyche. The analyst explains that after Neo's and Trinity's deaths, he wanted to study Neo's body and his anomalous powers as the one and convince his superiors to resurrect both of them. So now we start seeing the practical reason of
Yeah.
how they were brought back to life. You see the machines working on them and rebuilding them, and how it took a long time because their bodies were done. They were
Yeah.
over with. And you saw him get his eye back, because remember his eyes were burned,
Yep.
and you see them opened up like
Oh yeah.
like on the autopsy table, you know,
Hmm.
and they're getting work done, and you see the machines. And then I said nanites before. I think we actually saw actual nanotechnology just
Hmm.
rebuilding them. And if we get down to a biological sense, um, what can't the machines do if
Yeah.
that's the case? We're living in this fantasy world where this man can do all these things inside the matrix, but then he could do all those things in the real world. So why isn't resurrection because the
Yeah.
machines can do that, not a stretch of the imagination, a
Yeah.
suspension of disbelief. So you see them working on them, and then you see once he wakes up and once she wakes up, they like the bond between them is what is a power source, is what
Oh
they
yeah.
realized. You
It's
see the flash, it's like so emotional.
Yeah, it's a really big connection. I appreciated that the analyst, while he was explaining to Neo, is like, I thought you would be grateful that I was bringing you back. I thought you'd be happy, but there was something missing, and the missing piece was Trinity. There was that connection. He was like, I figured it out. Like, I kept trying to bring you back because I had the anomaly of anomalies. Like, who wouldn't want to study that? Who
Right.
wouldn't want to create new code and figure this out? So they're reconstructing him, and he says it, and like you see Neo almost, almost in a way rejecting the resurrection, like in constant pain and yelling and screaming. And he's like, I thought he'd be happy. And he goes, but there was something missing, and I figured out what it was. It was Trinity. It was you two together. And he noticed that when they were together, man, the energy that those two put off was through the roof. Like, it was just like nothing he had ever seen before. But the analyst also explains that by having them too close, it would constantly cause problems for the Matrix. So he was like, I had to find a way to keep you close within proximity, but not too close, which then makes you think back of all the scenes prior to this, where any moment they start to get close to one another, there was always something to pull them apart, whether it was her family, her artificial fake family that she has, whether it's his job, whether it's the friend, whatever the case may be. There was always something that whenever they got close, something would pull them apart. So I was like, okay, so things are starting to, make sense a little bit. And the analyst is like, yeah, you guys are like powering this thing like crazy. You guys together have this great, great connection. And as I told you before, like, that's one of the biggest highlights for me about the franchise as a whole. It's just, the Trinity and Neo connection. I love that we're still sticking with that.
Yeah, and they explain it a little bit. It's just once again suspension disbelief. The pods are just like supercharged. The bio
Mhm.
powers of it was able to keep them young, because
Yeah.
clearly, if these two people together could give off that much power, you wouldn't want them to die of old age.
Mhm.
So they found a way to halt their aging, so to
Yeah.
speak. So that's why it's been 60 years, but they look like
Yeah.
that. So the analysts discovered that due to the one's inherent connection to all humanity in the Matrix, manipulating Neo could make the Matrix produce more energy. Moreover, moreover, he found that the code anomaly in Neo was shared in his bond with Trinity, which you said, Ricardo,
Yeah.
and that by suppressing the memories and keeping them close but always apart, the Matrix generated more energy. Solving the energy crisis put the analyst in a position to seize power from the one and only architect. After which he rebuilt the new Matrix to control humans with emotional manipulation,
Yeah.
claiming that humans generally believe what they want to believe. Evil.
Yeah.
Neo's liberation destabilized the system and triggered a fail-safe reboot to the Matrix. But the analyst stalled the reboot by convincing his superiors that threatening to kill Trinity would coerce Neo to return to his pod. So now we finally get the whole story here.
Yeah. Yeah. I did like this take, man. I like the idea that, like, he even touches Neo's forehead and he goes, you know what, you guys don't care about. He goes, the architect was so worried about numbers and analysis and formulas. And he goes, none of that matters to human beings. Like, people are different, and we constantly have this discussion about humans and people and how they function. And he goes, all you guys care about is yourself and what's in here, like your feelings. And the idea that, we get into that conversation of like, humans want to be controlled. They want to feel comfortable in their lives. They want to feel like they're always right. It caters to them. And he talks about how, like, creating trauma for these people and these awful, horrific things, like, kept them in line, kept them in check, ruling them through fear. Like, this was a great talking. I was like, oh man, this is a great talking point from a master villain. You know what I mean? And the analyst was absolutely using that in order to keep everyone kind of like locked into their cages. He called them sheeple at a point. Like he goes the sheeple. Like he puts it out there. Like they'll follow exactly what I tell them to follow because I'm gonna make them live in fear, and because all they follow is this, like what their personal feelings are. They don't care about the truth. They just care about this. And I thought that was that was a good take from like such a bad guy.
Neo and Bugs return to EO and talk to Sati. She's back.
Mm-hmm.
Priyana Chopra Jonas.
Yeah. Yep.
And she's an exile program that Neo previously met in Revolutions. So, seeking to avenge her parents' deaths at the hands of the machines, Sati helps devise a plan to free Trinity. Back in the Matrix, Neo makes a deal with the Analyst. He will return to his pod if he fails to convince Trinity to leave the Matrix. So, him and Tiffany meet again. And Tiffany does reaffirm her identity as Trinity while talking with Neo. Realizing that he is lost, the Analyst attempts to kill her, but Agent Smith appears and attacks the Analyst, seeking revenge for his own imprisonment. So we get another intense scene here. Her pretend family comes to get her,
Yup.
and you think she's going to leave, and Neo will get plugged back into the Matrix. But then Smith, out of everybody, comes in to save the day. And we see the bullets flying again, and Neo's full on stopping them with just his hand so the team can escape. And more importantly, so Trinity can unplug. They're both fighting through the crowd. Like people are like pulling them back, just so they can reunite. And then once they reunite again, we just get this explosion.
Oh,
It's so epic. Like it's a love story, like you say,
dude,
Ricardo. Yeah.
I'm a sucker for a good love story, and at its core, there is a very, very strong love story. So again, you have this sequence where her family shows up. You have Neo make the deal with the Analyst. It's like, oh, if she chooses me, you got to let us go. But if she doesn't, you win. You get to do what you want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it has to be her choice. And they're playing dirty. Her family comes in. They're like, oh my god. I think it's the dog. The dog gets run over. Is that what it was? They're like, oh, we have to go.
It's some type of emergency. Yeah.
Yeah. She followed you out. She chased you here. She got hit by a car. We got to go to the hospital. We got to go to the hospital. And they're playing on that emotion, and they're going out, and it's like, oh no, like she's clearly choosing to stay. And she's like, I'm sorry. And they get to the door, and she stops because she sees everything that's happening to Neo. And it's one of my favorite parts because her husband is like, Tiffany, we have to go, Tiffany, and he's yelling her name. And this is where she drops the F-bomb. I wish you wouldn't effing call me that. And she was like, I hate that name. My name is Trinity. And all of a sudden she starts busting out the martial arts. And I was like, yeah, like this is where I got really excited. I'm like, all right, she's back. She's fully back. Let's go. You have the great action sequences, as you said, the fighting and whatnot. And the whole time you just have like dog piles, people on Neo, people on Trinity. They're just trying so hard to keep them apart. And this is where I was like, all right, this is what I came to see. And they're just reaching for each other. And there's this love story happening. You know what I mean? Both their arms are extended. They're yelling for each other. Neo. And he's like, Trinity. And they grab hands and they make that connection. And there's that explosion, that energy source. Just bam. And everyone goes flying back. And I was like, all right, baby, let's go. Let's hit the ground running.
So Neo, Trinity, and the team escape in their vehicles, chased through the streets by hordes of bot programs and attack helicopters. It's full-on action at this point.
Yeah.
People are literally jumping out of their windows
Yes.
as bombs, but to
Mhm.
prevent like a super graphic thing from happening, you see the code
Yeah.
hit when
I would
they jump out. Yeah.
it was interesting because that was definitely a creative choice, because obviously these are rated R pictures and we have seen, blood and whatnot, but the idea of having these bodies fall from buildings, and we're not talking about one body, we're talking about 50, 60, 70, 80, etc., and they're all falling and hitting the asphalt, and you would be seeing like blood and skull and guts everywhere, but they were like, no, we're gonna code it. And this was cool. This is where we started touching that, like, back into that horror section that I like so much, where they go outside and it's literally the entire city are bots. Everyone's got the black eyes, they're just standing there, and we get a comedic moment. This is the comedic moment I was talking about, where one of the other people on the team looks at Neo and is like, you think you can fly right now? And he goes and he does the whole pose, and you see the airwave a little bit, and you're like, oh, it's gonna happen. And he jumps, maybe a foot in the air. It doesn't work. He goes, yeah, that's not happening. And it's like it's a comedic moment. It's not gonna happen. And obviously he gets on the bike with Trinity, and he's doing force pushes, keeping everyone away, keeping bullets away. And again, this is where it got a little scary because they're being chased everywhere. The one vehicle is covered by the swarm, and as you mentioned, you have people turning into literal bombs, just jumping out of windows trying to take Neo and Trinity out.
As the last ones to be extracted from the Matrix, Neo and Trinity become cornered atop a skyscraper. So Neo is doing his best. He's blocking the bullets from the helicopter, but eventually they need someplace to go because the roof is going to be flooded with agents and such soon. So um, that brings us to our next scene here. This happens.
Yeah, dude.
So they both jump off the building
Mm-hmm.
and not knowing what the outcome will be. And they're just slowly, they're thinking, can they make the jump? Can they not? But they're hoping they can make the jump or then maybe Neo will fly. Neo drops, and we get a shocker moment here where Tiffany is the one flying. So, holding hands, they leap off, and Trinity begins to fly, taking them to safety. We're going to stop right here before we get to our final scene here.
Yeah.
What a scene.
This hit me. Like, I don't know why it hit me, because we've become so accustomed to the idea that Neo is this all and powerful being within the Matrix, right? Like, it's Neo. Like, Neo has always been the one. Like, he's been the one. And we talk about this connection. And this scene when they're on the top of the building and Trinity says, "This is where my dream ended." They have no idea what happens from this moment forward. And they take that leap of faith. It's just an absolute leap of faith. And the music cuts, you get nothing but silence. And all of a sudden, like, you start to see his body kind of go into a panic mode because he has no control. And all of a sudden he's hanging. He goes, "I'm not doing this. Are you doing this?" And she just hold him, and like, there's this, you got the beautiful sunset right there, the sun rising in the morning, and she's kind of looking out, and like, she's like, "Oh my God, like, I'm doing this. I'm in control." And the idea that Trinity is now this strong, powerful piece, I don't know why, dude. It hit me. Like, it got me. And then the helicopter's right there, and they're like, "Oh, we got to get out of here." And she just says bye, and she holds Neo, and she just like flies up superhero style. And I was like, oh, that was so good. I loved it.
With Trinity's newfound control over the Matrix, both of them return to confront the Analyst. She beats him up a little bit,
Oh yeah.
and with a snap of a finger, she keeps restoring his body every time she
Mm-hmm.
beats him up. That's how much control they have over the Matrix now. They thank him for giving them a second chance by resurrecting them, while they also express their contempt, obviously. Neo and Trinity fly off in the sky together, making plans to remake the Matrix. So now we see that Neo and Trinity have powers way beyond what Neo could ever do. They can now manipulate the Matrix however they want. And
Mm-hmm.
we end the movie there, and now we go back to Rage Against the Machine again. It's a cover of
Mm-hmm.
Wake Up, which is what ended the first Matrix movie, but by Brass Against, that viral band that
Yeah.
they went viral for a little bit and started putting out some really cool covers and such. So that's our movie. And for me here, let's do our initial thoughts upon this rewatch here. And it's the same thing that I thought about when I first saw this. Neo could pretty much do almost anything he wanted
Mm-hmm.
by the end of the first Matrix movie. And we say almost anything. But now it's a situation where he can do anything he wants, in addition to Trinity being able to do anything they want. They're literally gods now. You
Yeah.
know, they, I mean, he was a god before, but now it's
Oh
just
yeah.
like, with what he could do inside the Matrix. But now he could take care of himself. He could fly the bullets, this, that, the other. But now he could actually manipulate matter. It's almost Dr.
Yeah.
Manhattan level
Very, very,
of
very.
what they can do within the Matrix now. So that was my thought again. It was like, wow, like this really sets up some interesting concepts for the future. They talked about painting the rainbow sky, and
Yes.
that's a good idea. Maybe we might do that, but it's like the same thing hit me again. It was just like, wow, if they could manipulate the Matrix however they want, where would this, go next?
Yeah, because the analyst brings it up. It's like, oh, what are you going to do? You're going to try to end it, do this and do that. And they're kind of just like, we think we'd make some changes around here because the idea that they can manipulate it, they can change it to fit how they talk, how they like. They joked about the rainbows and whatnot. And like you said, we have two extremely OP characters now. Before Neo was just the one, like he was the one. And the movie makes it a point is like it's no longer just the one anymore, it's the combination of these two, like these two together are what are going to make these massive changes. And again, when they fall from the sky, Neo falls, he doesn't fly, she flies. So we don't know exactly how much time has passed between that moment and when they meet the analyst, because now Neo is in full, he's able to fly again, like he's able to fly, he's able to be in control again. So it's like, oh, like Trinity helped him get to this. Like again, he needed her just as much as she needed him, and like you said, we just got two massively OP characters now, and it opens the door of endless possibilities on what that means for the Matrix. Are they going to keep it running and make it to the what they feel is the best for humans and whatnot that allows people to stay and rest? Like I'm very curious on what direction they would take if they were going to make more. But yeah, like I love the combo of Neo and Trinity now being as OP as they are together.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the box office here. The budget was listed at 190 million,
Hmm.
and the box office unfortunately did 159 million. And we
Yeah.
reviewed that in the beginning. It's probably because this was released not only in the theaters but
Yeah.
on HBO Max as well. People were also not going to the theaters as much, so it was
Yeah.
two things.
People were still like there was still a lot of very hesitant people about going to the theaters. So we try to give a lot of leeway, or at least a little bit of leeway, to a lot of these movies that got hit with that massive change, because there were many people that it was like, especially someone like myself, where it was like, oh man, I have to take advantage of this. So I'm sure there were many families, many people who had the opportunity. It was like, oh, I can watch this first thing in the morning in my house. I can watch this at home. I don't have to go anywhere. I'm going to take advantage of that. So I think it definitely played a role in the box office return.
Right. And let's be fair, even if your movie was not released on a home streaming, it still suffered for those 2 years there because of the
Yep,
world situation that was happening,
absolutely.
unfortunately. So, um, lately we've been doing trivia, and I wanted to take this time to talk about the production and the casting for The Matrix Resurrections, because that's the big story here
Hmm.
as far as how this movie came along. We're going to get to the cast in a little bit, but I figured um, we can touch that there. So, let's take a look here. So I'm just going to read it as is what it says here. So, as explained by Lana Wachowski during the Berlin International Literature Festival of 2021, Warner Brothers constantly approached both the Wachowskis every year to
Hmm.
make another Matrix sequel, but the Wachowskis always declined the offers out of a lack of interest and because of their feelings that the trilogy story had concluded with Revolutions. However, in 2019, Ron and Lynn Wachowski, the Wachowskis' parents, they passed away alongside a close friend of Lana's, with her father passing away first, the friend second, and the mother third. So they had a very big loss.
Yeah.
After not being able to process that kind of grief, Lana suddenly conceived the story of the Matrix Resurrections one night. In her words, Wachowski felt that while she could not have her parents back, she could have Neo and Trinity back, feeling comforted to see them alive again. So, with Lana Wachowski stepping forward for a sequel, Warner Brothers readily accepted her concept, eager to have the franchise's creator aboard for the sequel, along with James Mateague, um, frequent collaborator with the Wachowskis. He directed V for Vendetta, so he came back on
Yeah.
as a producer here. Long story short, Lily Wachowski was not involved with the film due um, while she's working on the Showtime series Work in Progress, but gave her full blessing involved with those involved, especially her sister Lana. So that's how the movie came along there.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to share as far as that story, why this movie finally came along?
I think especially with art and in film, to be able to express yourself and what you're going through is it can be a very beautiful thing. And I can imagine how cathartic it was for her. And suddenly, like when you hear that and you start to think about the choices that were made in the movie, the idea of these characters that were gone that are now back, and showing how strong their connection are and how powerful they are together, like it's a beautiful testament. You know what I mean? Like I appreciate that about the film, even though there's going to be certain aspects of it that may fall short to many people. That's something that's always going to stand out to me, and I'm always going to be very happy that she got that opportunity to make it. Lily decided not to, but the fact that Lana was like, no, like I had these connections to these characters and I don't have them anymore, and to have such a great loss in her life, and for her to say, well, I'm dealing with such loss right now and it's very hard for me, but I can bring these characters back, these characters that are so important to me. And I think when the cast as well, when they talk about the Matrix, we've talked about this, like Keanu Reeves talks about how the Matrix changed his life, and I can only imagine what this did for the Wachowskis as well when it came to
Absolutely.
just who they were as people. And they bring it up in the movie. It's even one of the discussions within the movie, what the Matrix represented when they're having those meetings and whatnot. And I felt like that was Lana, like, putting a part of herself into the story. So the fact that she got to make this, I'm very happy for her. I'm very happy for her. And it makes me like the movie more so, because of information like that. And I can only imagine what it must have been like, but I'm very happy that they got to come together and do that, because that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing.
Well, Ricardo, you know how this works. I'm sure the Wachowskis threw around ideas over the years. What if we ever
Mhm.
did it again? But
Yeah.
nothing pen to paper. But after something tragic like that, Lana was just like, no, now I have it. Now I know.
Yep.
I think what's going to happen. Unfortunately, it takes tragic things happening to be inspired. But she was inspired, and here we are.
Hmm.
Reeves and Moss were confirmed to be. We're going to get into casting now a little bit here. Reeves and Moss were confirmed to be reprising their roles as Neo and Trinity upon the film's announcement in August 2019. In October 2019, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II was cast in the film, with some sources speculating he would be playing a young Morpheus, while Neil Patrick Harris was added in a then undisclosed role. Following the first trailer's release, Abdul-Mateen II confirmed he was indeed playing the role of Morpheus. We get a little controversy here now.
Oh yeah.
Lawrence Fishburne, who portrayed Morpheus in the original trilogy, announced in August 2020 that he was not asked to reprise the role of Morpheus. They didn't even call him.
Yeah.
If you were a betting man, Ricardo, would you say that this is how Lana Wachowski wrote this, or something behind the scenes with Lawrence Fishburne and Warner Brothers? If you were a betting man,
If the fact that he wasn't called at all makes me believe something with Warner Brothers, because again, Lana, the Wachowskis in general, and the cast have openly talked about their connection to the movies and whatnot. So I find it a little hard to believe that there would be no reach out from Lana or from anyone else, regarding the role of Morpheus. Even if it was written that this was the route they were going to take, I'm still surprised that Morpheus wasn't called, like, hey, heads up, we're going to be doing another Matrix movie. This is the approach we're going to take with the movie and your character. Unfortunately, that means that we are going to be recasting the role. That's happened. Like, people can have those conversations, but the fact that he was never called, and I'm sure people will say, well, they don't have to call him, and I get that, but I feel like with what those movies did for film and who was involved, I do think, especially as an actor, to see the pieces moving and to hear chatter but realize you haven't been contacted or brought up or mentioned, it's kind of maybe, I don't know if off-putting is the word, but just a little suspicious. So as a betting man, I'd be like, man, I wonder if something happened between Lawrence and Warner Brothers, and the studios were just like, hey, don't even, again, I don't think it was anything Lana did. I think, I think that the connections that they have, I don't think Lana would specifically be like, no, we're not going to contact Lawrence Fishburne. But maybe it was a studio decision. Maybe the studio was just like, hey, there's no need to even contact him. Like, get the ball rolling, get the story, get the script, get everything locked. Don't even worry about anything else. But yeah, I'm not entirely too sure.
Yeah, and I don't recall Lawrence Fishburne being public with any bad blood between him and Warner
Mm-mm.
Brothers.
No.
It's just a very odd decision. And benefit of the doubt, maybe they didn't. Maybe the role of Morpheus, in order for the impact to hit, they needed Morpheus to be a character that didn't live, and maybe that's the
Yeah.
way it was written, you know,
Yeah.
and hence having to have a new form. But see, you didn't have to do it that way because Lawrence Fishburne could have played that character even though he passed away in the real world. You
Yeah.
know, it would have just been a digital version of him. But
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt, maybe that's the way it was written. But I don't know. Like you, just the way the Wachowskis have such a connection with everybody, it would just
Mhm.
feel such a um it just feels like, no, that's not the way it happened. Something was going on behind the scenes where
Yeah.
Fishburne wasn't contacted.
Because you bring up a good point. Like we're talking about nanotech and AI in this movie, and it's like, oh, it could have taken we could have done like a like a Man of Steel, Jor-El, where it's like, oh, I'm his, consciousness.
Right.
They could have played with this idea of like, hey, there's an artificial intelligence that followed the algorithm of Morpheus for so long. They studied Morpheus for so long. We have his data in the system. Like this is a representation of Morpheus, even though it's not actually Morpheus. They could have absolutely done that. That's why I think that maybe Lana had written it specifically this way, because Niobe is a perfect character for it, because she's pushing against Neo, and Morpheus would never push against Neo. Morpheus is so pro Neo, and they even bring it up in the movie where Morpheus refused to ever doubt in Neo no matter what. Even many years after, he was like, nope, we're never going back on this because Neo did what needed to be done. So I do think narratively, I think it probably made the most sense for Lana to do that. But the fact again that he was never contacted, and it does happen, and that's unfortunate. It does happen. There's been numerous times we've heard actors that have worked in major studio productions where they'll go, oh, I haven't heard anything. Nobody's hit me up once. And it's always a little off-putting when that happens, because it's kind of like, oh, like they were so significant to the franchise. The fact that Lawrence Fishburne like wasn't aware of what was happening. And again, I'm sure people will say, well, Rick, guess what? He wasn't involved in the movie. They didn't have to contact him whatsoever. I'm like, I get that, but there's also like, I don't know, this connection. We talk about connection all the time. There's this connection to the trilogy. And it's like, oh, really? He wasn't contacted once? Really? Not okay. All right. Whatever, I guess.
So Pinkett Smith entered negotiations to reprise her role as Niobe, with Jessica Henwick entering negotiations as well. Henwick was considered by the Walt Disney Company to audition for a role in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings at the same time. She was
Mm-hmm.
offered to audition the part of Bugs, in which she described as a red pill, blue pill moment for her.
Yes.
She chose Resurrections over Shang-Chi.
Mm-hmm.
So we already discussed she was in the MCU adjacent at the time
Mm-hmm.
in the Defender series, but um, after seeing Shang-Chi, we don't know what happened there. Chances are she wasn't going to play the same character. She was just
Yeah.
going to play somebody else. And that's happened where people have played two different roles in the MCU. We've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a stretch of the imagination, but finding out that you have a chance to be in another Matrix movie, no one's going to falter. It was like MCU, a Matrix movie, and by the way, kudos to her, because when you get cast in an MCU movie, you get a
Yeah.
lot of exposure. So
Yes.
she didn't go with the sure thing. She went with the gamble. And yes, a Matrix reboot is a gamble, in my opinion.
Oh, 100%, especially coming this many years later. And I think that it's a testament to, again, what the Matrix did for film. Like the MCU, especially at this point, still was very big, man. Like you said, you're talking about a lot of exposure. And not only that, usually when you sign on to an MCU project, you're kind of guaranteed for quite a few projects, unless the character is killed off. But even now in Marvel comic movies, that doesn't mean anything. But like, she was looking at almost like a sure thing of sequels, being seen by just many people. And the idea was like, oh, but you get to do a Matrix sequel. You get to work with Lana Wachowski, one of the two. You get to work with Keanu Reeves. You get to work with Carrie Ann Moss. You get to work with all this talent and a Matrix movie. I'll be honest with you, man. If someone gave me that same pill and was like, all right, Ray, you can be in an MCU movie, or you could have been in Matrix Resurrections, obviously prior to knowing how the movies are going to turn out, I'd be like, Matrix, let's go do the
Yeah.
Matrix. You know what I mean? Like, there's just something special about the Matrix.
So Pinkett Smith was convinced to return after learning from Lana Wachowski how much the film meant for her. They went through a couple different versions for Niobe until they settled to depict the character in an elderly form. So maybe that did have a bearing on the script and how it would
Mhm.
go. You don't know. Um, here's the piece on Hugo Weaving. Hugo Weaving, who starred in the franchise as Agent Smith, was originally approached to reprise his role, but he had scheduling conflicts with his involvement in Tony Kushner's theatrical adaptation of The Visit, leading Wachowski to conclude that the dates would not work after staying in touch with Weaving for a while. Weaving was later confirmed to be appearing in the film, but through archive footage of the original trilogy, while Jonathan Groff was confirmed to have been cast as Agent Smith in December 2021, replacing Hugo Weaving. Um, so that's what happened there. So we ended up having to recast not one but two iconic Matrix characters there.
See, but that's the interesting thing. So it lets me know that everyone else in the core group
Mm,
was contacted, and the only one that didn't got contacted was Lawrence Fishburne, and that makes me go,
it's an eyebrow
what,
raise.
yeah, what y'all do to my boy, man? I like Lawrence Fishburne. What happened? You know what I mean? Like I'm like, you contacted everybody, like even Hugo. And look, it would have been awesome to see Hugo Weaving return. You know what I mean? But schedule didn't allow it, and we got the next best thing, so it was still good.
Yeah. Joey Pantoliano, Joey Pants, as
Hmm.
some people know him. He appeared in the first film as Cypher, expressed interest in April 2020 in reprising his role despite his character's death in the first installment. He messaged Lana Wachowski about the possibility of bringing him back, but received no response from her. Um, let's see here. Christina Ricci, if you're blink and you miss her, she was in there for a
Bro,
split second.
I was like, I remember going, Christina Ricci, and she's in it for a scene, and that's it. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, was this something that she just really wanted to work with Lana? I'm not sure, or because it was a Matrix movie, I'm not sure, but it was a delight. I was like, oh man, can we get more Christina Ricci, please?
Yeah. She was announced as part of the cast in June 2021. She previously worked with the Wachowskis on Speed Racer in
That's
2008.
right. Okay,
So,
that's right. Yeah.
here's the fun part here. Henwick confirmed to have filmed a scene with a background cameo appearance of Tom Hardy as Venom Let There Be Carnage was being filmed simultaneously with Resurrections, though it is currently unclear if Hardy's appearance was kept in the finished film. So we don't even know if he's in there. No one's been able to find it, so we think no.
Yeah.
Um, so long story short, Tom Hardy may or may not have been an extra in the
Yeah, in
Matrix
the Matrix.
Resurrections.
What a random note. Like the idea is like, hey, by the way, that guy looks like Tom Hardy. And it's like, oh my God, I think it is Tom Hardy. But like you said, no one's been able to spot him yet. So I don't know if it actually happened or not.
Our last tidbit here. After the film's Toronto premiere, it was confirmed that Chad Stahelski, director of the John Wick movies, who previously served as stunt coordinator in the previous Matrix films, does appear in the film as Handsome Chad. He's Tiffany's husband. Uh, so that's as far as that goes.
Yep.
Let's finally give some love to the cast here before we start wrapping things up. Obviously, we have Keanu Reeves as Neo / Thomas Anderson, and I just want to put it out there. Shout out to Keanu for playing a broken version of Neo.
Yeah.
A version of Neo that needed to be built back up again, and that's what I got from the movie.
Yeah.
Obviously, Carrie Ann Moss as Trinity, but shout out to Carrie Ann Moss for her scenes as Tiffany,
Yeah.
because we know her as the tough BA version, which is Trinity. So we got to see that just humanized version of her as Tiffany. So shout out to Carrie Ann Moss for that as well.
Yeah, I love that because there's a clear distinction between Tiffany and when she becomes Trinity at the end of the movie. Like it's so noticeable when she has that shift, and I love that. I love that as seeing her as an actor, just being able to give us that Tiffany performance where you're like, wow, I don't see Trinity in there at all. And then when she makes that switch, like stop calling me Tiffany, and she switches, and I was like, oh, so good.
We have Yahya Abdul Mateen II as Morpheus, and We already gave some love to him there. Of course, Jessica Henwick as Bugs, and
Hmm.
Jessica Henwick describes her character as the audience's eyes. So if
Yep.
it ever feels like she's given a lot of exposition, she's supposed to be, because she's
Yep.
supposed to be us. So really cool there. Obviously, Jonathan Groff as Agent Smith. We already talked about him. So he did mention that he did not want to do an impression of Hugo Weaving, feeling more connected to the role during the fight sequences. So that's as far as that goes. So he made a choice. I'm not going
Hmm.
to imitate Hugo Weaving, and obviously it worked out.
Yeah.
We have Neil Patrick Harris as the analyst, Priyanka Chopra Priyanka Chopra Jonas as Sati. For those of you wondering, it is not the original girl that played her in Revolutions. That's Tanvir K. Atwell. So they didn't contact
Hmm.
the same young girl who would have been an adult by now. We already mentioned Christina Ricci as Gwen, a business executive at Thomas's video game company. Jada Pinkett Smith came back as Niobe. It took 5 hours of time to apply those prosthetics to make her look older. We have Telma Hopkins as Freya, the head of botany and EO. We mentioned director Chad Stahelski as Chad. He's the director of the John Wick movies. We've talked about this. He served as the stunt
Yeah.
coordinator on the previous Matrix films, and if not for that connection with Keanu Reeves, we wouldn't have the John Wick franchise.
That's right.
Yeah. We have Lambert Wilson as the Merovingian. He came back. Trying to see here. And I think that's it as far as the actors go. So I was going to do this at the end of our breakdown for the Matrix Revolutions, but I figured we would be fair and give those actors in Resurrections a chance.
Hmm.
If you could name like your top 3 performances out of the entire Matrix franchise, who would you pick? Or top 2, top 1? So for me, immediately, it's Lawrence Fishburne as
Hmm.
Morpheus and Hugo Weaving as Agent Smith. Before I even consider anybody else, those 2 performances from a pure acting standpoint, for me, are the biggest standouts, aside from Neo as the lead, obviously. But for me, just those 2. And then from this movie, I love Jonathan Groff. I love Yaya, but Bugs is such a cool character. So there we go. So I guess that's my answer. Hugo Weaving, Lawrence Fishburne, Jessica Henwick. There we go.
This is gonna feel so cheap because the moment you asked, my head went Hugo Weaving, Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah.
Like that was it was my first. It was my first, and the reason why is because I feel like whenever I think of those movies, Neo is the one, right? Like it's Keanu Reeves is Neo, it's his movie. But I remember the significance of hearing Lawrence Fishburne give those monologues, give those speeches. I remember Hugo Weaving, hearing his cadence, his voice, watching Hugo's character change over the movies. Over the movie, he progresses more and more and more. He gets more loose with the character, but he still has that cadence. Like those 2 always stood out to me with these amazing performances. Again, Lawrence Fishburne, I was so into the idea of Morpheus. Again, Neo is the one. He is the OP character, but there was something about Morpheus, the way he carried himself, the way Lawrence Fishburne presented the character, if you will, within the Matrix and in the real world. There was a duality to Morpheus, and I love that aspect. So right off the bat, those 2, and I already said it. I said at the beginning when we first started this breakdown, I was like, man, when we got to Bugs, Jessica Henwick, I was like, she's incredible. Like I don't.
Yeah.
There's this charisma to her
Great word.
that when she's on screen, I kid you not, if the movie was going to follow her, I'm on that ride. Like
Yeah.
we're introduced to her so fast, and it's not one of the core characters. Like we meet her before we're back with Neo, before we're back with Trinity, before we're back with the idea of Morpheus and Agent Smith, if you will. We're being introduced to Bugs, and immediately I was drawn to her. I was like, oh man, wow. Like I don't know what it was. I could put my finger on it. That's why I use the word charisma. And I was just like, there's something about her. I really enjoyed her presence. I enjoyed her take. And again, I could absolutely have followed her if they would have been like, hey, like she's going to be one of your strong leads. I'm like, I'm good for that ride. So of the first trilogy, yeah, Lawrence Fishburne comes right to mind
Yeah,
as does Hugo Weaving. Like those two immediately pop right in there. And Carrie Ann Moss is no slouch either. Like I
absolutely.
love her as Trinity. I think she's fantastic down to the physicality and the performances. She gives that great somber monologue when her character, passes away in the third movie. But as I mentioned, I would go with, for the first trilogy, Hugo Weaving and Lawrence Fishburne. So it feels like a cheap copy. I apologize, but that's
It's
where my
fine.
mind went.
That's
As soon
okay.
as you asked, I was like, oh, that's where my mind went. It just, I always think of those two right away. And then there was a reason why when we started this breakdown and she came on screen, I was like, I need to just point out how much I love her in this movie. So I'm going to give it to Jessica Henwick in this one.
It's okay. Hey, sometimes we match up, sometimes we don't, but
Yeah.
when we match
Yeah.
up, it's fun.
Yep.
And here's my thing. We already gave love to Jessica Henwick. Check out her filmography, guys. Like I've
Yeah.
seen her in a lot of different things. She's charismatic and she
Hmm.
brings something different to each role. And
Yeah.
Bugs, there was no exception to the rule there. And let's not put it out there. Let's not throw shade to Keanu and Carrie Ann
Hmm.
Moss, both absolutely incredible over the course of the entire franchise. Um, Keanu is the lead, but we needed Trinity as well.
Oh, yeah.
We needed them both. Um, but yeah, like Ricardo said, just Fishburne and Weaving, man, in that original trilogy is absolutely amazing, to the point that you miss them
Yeah.
in
Yep.
Resurrections. You miss them, and as much nostalgia bait that they put in this movie, Wachowski did, th- and no shade to Yaya, no shade to Groff, both amazing actors in their own right. You just missed Fishburne and Weaving. There was just
Hmm.
something they're missing,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
They are, no pun intended, they are coded into the matrix for us. And I think that's why it was so smart of Groff and Yaya to not do an imitation of those characters. Like there's a familiar nature to them in the way they speak and what they're talking about. And again, Groff would sometimes even in like a wink to the camera moment where when Neo would say something, he goes, "It was inevitable. It doesn't
Right.
have to be," and it's like a wink, wink, like he's giving us a little, but not too much. And I think that you had to do that because, as you mentioned, we do miss them. And the last thing we would want is to see actors just doing an imitation of them. Because then it's like, well, if you're just going to do an imitation, why couldn't we have them? So I do think it was smart on the actors and Lana to be like, hey, you have to kind of approach it very differently. But yeah, their presence is definitely missed. And I would have loved to have seen them again in these movies.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of feel weird giving Neil Patrick Harris a shout out because he does good in everything. He's
I
just
love NPH.
he's just a seasoned actor at this
Yeah.
point. So my man just goes for it every single time. So
Mhm.
um oh, here we go. Shout out to Jada Pinkett Smith for playing an older version
Oh, yeah.
of Niobe.
Yeah.
That's not just prosthetics, that's her acting.
Yeah, and
You know?
and major kudos to her because I know we've seen it where sometimes you'll see an actor with prosthetics to, be older, but sometimes they don't capture the cadence, the voice, whether they slow down their words. Even she does this great thing with her mouth in the movie, and what I mean is there's very little movement. Like it's not how like someone like us can be very expressive and this and that. And many would argue like, oh, it's for prosthetics. I'm like, no, it's like she's using the least amount of strength she needs to just to get the words out because of her age. Like she keeps her lips very close together. It's like I know exactly who you are, Neo, and but it's keeping it very tight, and that's an acting choice, and it was great because it showed the years on her. That's not
Yeah.
easy to do, to play a much older person because you got to change your whole your body language is different, your reaction time is different, the way you move your arms, your legs, your head, your neck, everything. So yeah, kudos
Yeah.
to Jada Pinkett.
So kudos to all these folks here. I mean, I'll even give a shout out to Joey Pants in the first
Yeah,
Matrix movie. He was great. Cypher was, I mean, he was awful as a
yeah,
character,
yeah,
but
yeah. I
he
love
did
that
a
guy.
yeah, he did a great job. I forget his name, but the actor that played Bane in
Oh
Matrix,
yeah, dude.
just his impression of Hugo Weaving. There's so many different
Yeah.
see, and that's the thing about the Matrix franchise. There's so many different roles. There's so many
Hmm.
different things. Both women that played the Oracle, those are great
Love
characters
them.
too.
Love them.
Those
Love
are
them.
great characters too. There's just so many iconic moments, so many iconic characters, and as divisive as this franchise is, there is some enjoyment to be had. If
Yes.
you are a fan of genre films, there is some enjoyment to be had. But having said that, I guess the Panel Bros official favorite characters are in no particular order from the original trilogy. Our standouts are Hugo Weaving and Florence Fishburne, and in the new movie Resurrections, Jessica Henwick. Right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, because look, I did that thing where for Jessica, anytime she was in a new film, I was excited to see her. And that's
Yeah.
how I knew. Like I was drawn to her. I was like, oh man, she's in the Glass Onion, she's in this, she's in that. Oh, I can't wait to see her in this. And I kept hoping, like, oh man, I want her star to blow up because again, the moment I saw her on screen for Resurrections, I was like, oh no, yeah, she right away, something in the eye.
Alrighty. So we are going to start winding things down here with our closing thoughts. And I wanted to leave our listeners and viewers with this question here. So it's been stated that The Matrix will continue, and it is undecided how it will continue. We mentioned that this is a legacy sequel. So it's a sequel that happened after a certain amount of time. I believe I read it was 10 years at least. So you're talking about from 2003 to 2021. We're looking at, was that 18 years? It's a long time.
Okay. Yeah.
So now that this is gone, I believe I saw that Lana Wachowski will serve as producer on The Matrix moving forward. I didn't quite get who would be directing. They haven't really decided yet. But where do you think we go from here? Are we going to continue the story with Neo and Trinity? Are we going to go full on reboot with other people in the Matrix? Because there's so many different stories we can explore. Where would you see this going, Ricardo?
For me, I think that obviously I know they would love to tap back into the story of Neo and Trinity because to them that's a guarantee, right? They want to tap into that. It almost reminds me of what Star Wars did, where they want to continue to do sequels, but they want to have that lineage to the Skywalker name. I wouldn't be surprised if they want to do something similar. The beautiful thing about the Matrix, and we got a taste of it in the Animatrix, is there is many stories that we can tell within the Matrix about people waking up, choosing to wake up, people choosing not to wake up, people like Cypher, people that choose to stay in the Matrix. I would love to see. Look, we've seen war, we've seen some massive world building, and we've seen a peace, a treaty, if you will. I would love to see stories that don't have to feel as big as a Revolutions, but some more in vein of the first Matrix movie, something relatively smaller, just about you know other characters. Like, are we doing a prequel? Do we want to see what it was like to wake Trinity up? Do we want to see what it was like to wake Morpheus up? Do we want to see what those characters, who they were, who they became to be? Because we never really learned those stories. Like, what was it that pushed Trinity to fight to wake up? The Animatrix explored characters like the Kid and other characters, and it's like, oh well, we get to meet so many awesome characters in this trilogy, as you mentioned, where it's like, oh, we could have an endless supply of stories of just like, well, how did they come to be? We could tackle, look, you could create a new trilogy based off of one of the 6 times that Zion has been destroyed, where one of the choices is made that the one is just going to pick a group of survivors to rebuild Zion. We could watch that story play out where that person goes, okay, like this is what we're going to do. Oh, wow. That's my job as the one, is to pick survivors and rebuild Zion. Okay. You could tell that story. Like that can be something. I'm a big fan of the Animatrix. We've talked about
Yeah.
this. So I would love to see exploring more stories like that. Like, give me more stories like that. And I think that they could absolutely do it. I'm not sure if that's the plan, but I think they have a lot here to work with, that there's a lot of foundation to play with.
So I did do some reading here while you were speaking. When the film was released, James Mateague stated that there was no plans for future Matrix films. So that was back in
Okay.
2021. They felt that the way that it ended That
Hmm.
was it. You know, it was just a one-time deal. In April of 2024, eventually Warner Brothers has announced that they're developing a new installment in the franchise with Drew Goddard attached to write and
Ooh.
direct.
Okay.
Lana Wachowski will serve as executive producer. So if
Okay.
Drew Goddard sounds familiar, let's take a
Yeah.
look here. Um, he directed The Cabin in the Woods
Hmm.
and Bad Times at the El Royale.
Hmm.
He's also um, just worked on other projects you might know about. He's an executive producer on the Netflix Daredevil series,
Hmm.
um, executive producer Cloverfield Paradox. Um, let's see, executive producer and writing credits on The Martian.
Yeah.
Um, he's worked on Alias. He's worked on Lost. So this man is no stranger to genre
Hmm.
projects. You know, World War Z. You know, I'll just keep going down here. So Cloverfield, the original
I
Cloverfield.
love Cloverfield,
So
dude.
he's
That is
worked.
such a gem for me.
So he's worked on a lot of different. Even though he wasn't the director, he's worked on a lot of different projects over the years. So
Hmm.
that's who they got. Thankfully, Lana Wachowski will continue on as a producer. And I mean, you know, Warner Brothers owns just so many different properties. Why not give it another shot? You know,
Yeah.
why not? And let's see what happens. And because it's a new writer director, and because Lana Wachowski is only producing now, then maybe moving forward, maybe Neo and Trinity won't be a part of it. You
Yeah.
know, and I'd be okay with that. What if um we go for the seventh iteration of the one? I don't know.
Yeah. Like there's so many places they could go.
You know, I mean, they never confirmed if there would be more iterations after Neo, but maybe we go into that, you know, that direction there. There's just so many different ways we can go, but kudos to the Wachowskis. They created this original universe, you know, and
Yeah.
we look back and we talked about the Matrix, not only during this breakdown, but we talked about the Matrix so much because it was, and I said this before, we said this before, it's not only an iconic film, it was an iconic place in history. It
Yep.
changed cinema, it changed history when it came out. So there's so many different directions that we can go in, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. You know, whether or
Yeah.
not we continue Neo and Trinity's story, or we, you know, we start something brand new. You know,
Yeah.
and who knows? Uh, maybe things get a second win here. You know, people thought Scream was dead in the water for some time.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah. That's
know,
true.
like they thought Scream 4, that was it. And then all of a sudden, your boys come out, you know,
Yeah, boy.
Radio Silence,
Radio
right?
silence, man.
Yeah,
Radio silence.
Scream
Yeah.
5 and Scream 6, like, it just breathed new life into the franchise, you know? So, you never know with, what do we call these? Requels?
Yeah.
Reboots?
Yeah.
I don't know what,
Requels and
you
sequels.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
this was a legacy sequel, you know,
Oh yeah.
but, you know, I'm okay with this, and, you know, your eyebrows raised when I mentioned Drew Goddard. You know, you
Yeah.
recognize the name. He's been in quite a
Yeah.
few projects over the years. We'll see what happens, but who knows? Maybe he can capture that lightning in a bottle again. We'll see.
I hope so. I hope so.
All righty. Anything else before we finish off here, Ricardo? Because this has been interesting here. I've enjoyed doing this. You know, we haven't really gone through, with the exception of, like, you know, Nolan's franchises or Snyder's franchises. We haven't really gone through, you know, a complete franchise. But this was pretty cool. Looking forward to when we do the next one here. But I'm glad that we chose The Matrix. You know, it's
Yeah, dude.
I like what you said. You know, it's divisive, but there's still some good to be had.
Yes, I think that because oftentimes, and it can happen to me too, is that we can see a movie and, there could be certain elements we don't like about it and we feel like that can deter the whole movie. But I've gotten to a point now where I'm like, there may be some things I don't agree with, maybe some choices I question. But at the end of the day, if there's enough for me to pull from it that I can enjoy, like, I should be able to walk away from that and say, I still had a good time. I'm very, very, very grateful that something as significant as an IP as a franchise as the Matrix, that we got to participate, we got to watch it as they were happening. When you hear people who were able to go to the theaters when Star Wars first came out, that trilogy. And when they talk about it, and you're like, man, that was a monumental shift in movies. And you hear directors, for example, like Zack Snyder, who said, like, oh man, when he saw Star Wars, that was what really kicked his dream into gear. And it's awesome that we got to be a part of that we got to watch The Matrix in theaters and kind of go, wow. And we've said it before and we'll say it again. I'll never get tired of saying it. There was movies before The Matrix and movies after The Matrix. You talk about how it was such a staple in history and film and in cinema. And I do love the fact that we were able to watch this franchise as a whole just grow theatrically and grow with it and watch it kind of I don't want to infect the real world. People bought into the
Yeah.
idea of that. And I love that it became a big thing in pop culture where, very similar to, you don't have to see Star Wars to know that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. You don't have to see the Matrix movies to know some of the most iconic things about the Matrix movies, because they become ingrained in pop culture, whether it's the bullet time and Neo dodging, whether it's Morpheus with the red pill and the blue pill, whether it's Hugo Weaving and his cadence and his dialogue. You know what I mean? Like, all that is synonymous with the franchise. And I'm glad that through the test of time, they're still as important as they were back then. And the inspiration that other movies took from these movies and grew. It's been a pleasure to be able to be a part of that time period. And I'm glad we got to talk about it. I'm glad we got to discuss it. And again, even when there's moments where I'm kind of like, that could have been a little different or whatnot, there's still something that I'm able to take away. And then obviously talking about Lana and her reason for making this movie is, that's a very touching thing. And I'm glad she got to make it. And again, I'm a sap, bro. We talk about it. I'm a sap. I love stories. And the idea that The Matrix, which has bullet time and some of the craziest visual effects and slow motion and kung fu fights and wire work and amazing explosions, in there's a love story. And I'm like, that's such a beautiful thing. So I'm happy these movies exist, and I'm glad we get to watch them and get to talk about them.
All right. So we did try kind of rank them, and I don't want us to just do an official rank or anything like that, but just off the top of your head, how would you rank it? For me, it's just in order they came out. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how I'd rank them. And
Yeah.
yourself?
Oh man, this is going to be interesting. I would go Matrix 1 as obviously the top. I would go Revolutions,
Mm-hmm.
and I might
Mm.
I might put Resurrections above Reloaded, but only because of a personal bias of what I know the movie represents, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, I know what it's for, where I know Reloaded was a sequel because the studio was like, we have to make a sequel.
Correct.
And knowing that the Resurrection was Lana coming to Warner Brothers and saying, hey, I have an idea for this. This is going to be for me. There's something there that hits me in a way that I'm like, oh, I might actually put you above Reloaded because of that emotional connection, And that's the beautiful thing about movies is we all have our own personal reasons for why we ranked them where we ranked them. But I think that essence and look, I'm biased. We brought Trinity back, and I love her so much. So I'm like, hey, we got her back.
Shout out to Carrie Ann Moss, right?
Yep, we got her back. I'm happy.
Alrighty. Folks, that was the Panel Bros official breakdown of The Matrix Resurrections. If you could please give us a like, share, and subscribe on YouTube at the Panel Bros, we'd appreciate it. Those interactions with us help our reach for people to listen to us more and to view us more. So thank you for that in advance. Also, if you could please leave a comment below, letting us know how you felt about our breakdown for The Matrix Resurrections. Who would you name as your favorite characters from the franchise, and where do you see this franchise going? Please let us know in the comments below. For Ricardo Segura, this is Anderson Marchak saying thank you for coming to the panel.